Thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge everybody who is here. We obviously have a lot of people from counseling psychology, but also from different departments, and also from the community. I know there are representatives from Centro Hispano here, as well as from Glacier Edge Elementary. And so just want to welcome you and hope that we have many more of these events where community members can participate with graduate students and with researchers in trying to figure out ways of helping our local communities more. So now I'll give a brief bio. I could say a lot more about Martica. I met her in 2010 at a conference on developing interventions for Latino youth and families, and I was so impressed by her work and the work of her partner, Paul Smokowski, on identity development of immigrant youth and Latino youth in general. Her bio reads that her current research encompasses Mexican, Latino adolescents, and families in community-based participatory research. Areas of study include adaptation and acculturation and its impact on parenting and school bonding. Dr. Bacallao is currently co-investigator and director of implementation for the North Carolina Academic Center for Excellence in Youth Violence Prevention. And she's doing this work from Arizona, by the way. Much to her chagrin, I think, right? Dr. Bacallao implements school, parent training, and bicultural skills training programs to prevention and control minority youth violence in rural communities. As a certified trainer, educator, practitioner, Dr. Bacallao served on the American Board of Examiners for Psychodrama, Sociometry, and Group Psychotherapy. She is a graduate from the St. Elizabeth's Hospital Psychodrama Training Program and continued extensive training in sociometry and group work. She earned her PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and her master's degree in social work from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her bachelor's degree in education from Illinois State University. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Martica Bacallao.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back in Wisconsin. I did my master's work here, loved it here, and really consider myself a Midwest girl at heart. Okay, so I want to just tell you that I'm Cuban, I'm an immigrant, I'm a child of an immigrant, and we escaped from Cuba when I was 3 years old. My family and I moved with my grandparents to a little town, rural community in southern Illinois. And I grew up and through college hearing about and professors telling me that bicultural skills, biculturalism, was a dangerous psychological state. It was a borderline, marginal position to be in functioning in this society. And that was not my reality of it. And I would check in with my cousins who were all bilingual, bicultural, and my sisters, and we would have talks about this. I was always fascinated with why was it perceived, biculturalism, as this marginalized place. And so I ended up doing my dissertation on, of course, what I'm most interested in is how do biculturalism and how to develop bicultural skills. So I want to tell you a little bit. We all know these are, I want to say something that I work in rural communities, and this was in Siler City, North Carolina, and they had this little group of teenagers that were learning traditional dances, Mexican dances, and this was all parent-led because there weren't like official classes like you would have in a city. Okay, so this is basically a slide of immigration in the history of the U.S. and all that over a course of 200 years. And basically what I want to show in this slide is that we are now at our highest point of immigration here, and 50% of that being from Latin America. The percent of the U.S. population, Hispanic population, continues to grow, and so there we have the projection that by 2050 it'll be at 30.2. And the reasons for that growth, that rapid growth among Latinos is a higher fertility rate. We have Latinos who come and they are at childbirth years, and the flow across the borders. They're also healthy. They're physically healthy and strong, so that increases fertility rates. Now, acculturation. I want to say that these photographs were taken of the teens and the families that participated in the Entre Dos Mundos program, Between Two Worlds, in North Carolina, rural North Carolina. And when I went with my camera, I asked families and their kids, to take their photographs, but we always said, where do you want to stand? We never positioned them. So as a qualitative researcher, it's always interesting to look at where they've wanted to stand next to for their photograph. And so this adolescent stood to the left of her, that square thing that's kind of glowing, that is a map of Mexico that she has there. It's just it was the material that was on that was reflective. And then you see they've got a U.S. map, a U.S. flag above that. So what is acculturation? On the left, Luis, a father from El Salvador, he has teens, all of these families had teenagers, said that Americanization means that the person has to let go of their identity and has grabbed on to the customs of this country and uses those customs in his life here. But these new customs aren't necessarily better customs. They're just other customs. And on the right, we have Reina, female adolescent. She was 15, who said, this is how she explained it. One has to become like them. Americans. One has to talk like them. One has to act like them. One has to dress like them so that we can feel like them and show them that we can belong here too. Acculturation was first defined by Redfield, an anthropologist, in 1936, where he talks about individuals that come together. And they come together on a daily basis through work, through worship, through community, through interactions, business. And in that daily interactions, they go back to their homes and they are changed from that experience on a daily, consistent interaction. So acculturation's original term or the definition was that both parties, or all people that come together, are changed by their interaction with others from different cultures. Acculturation wasn't a one-way change. It occurs with everyone. So the criteria and the theoretical frameworks we used for acculturation, so I'm a psychodramatist by training. I use action methods in my interventions with family. We do not sit and talk. We move it into action. So with this bicultural skills training program, where we worked with multiple family groups, adolescents and parents, sometimes together, sometimes separate, we use the diamond. And let me just explain this. That the first line here is your relationship, let me see. Your relationship to culture of origin. So at the point of zero, but with families I don't say point of zero, I say starting point. So at the starting point here, what is your relationship to your culture of origin? And to make the language more simple is, how Mexican are you? How Mexican do you feel? Now, I had parents that were, really offended by that. But to just, to use non-jargon language, how Mexican do you feel in this country? And, okay. Then there's another line, another pull. And that pull is the relationship to host to U.S. culture. And so we would have the family you start at starting point, and place themselves somewhere with how Mexican do you feel in this country, and they'd place themselves somewhere here. And then they'd come back to starting point, and then turn this way and say, how what is your relationship? How American do you feel? How, non-Mexican do you feel in this country? So Barry's work takes the modes of acculturation, breaks them down into 4 domains. Separation, his work really laid beautifully with the diamond of opposites, which is a psychodramatic technique. So in the upper quadrant towards culture of origin only is the domain or the section of separation. High culture of origin, low acculturation. That's that domain. I'm going to keep going. Assimilation is on the opposite end, where it's host culture only. High involvement with the new culture, very little connection or involvement with culture of origin. Cultural marginality is at the bottom, where there is a low intensity or low pulls this way or that way, very low intensity, little affiliation with either culture. And then we have in the middle section there, that upper quadrant, is biculturalism, high involvement in both cultures. So assimilation theory says that you come, you're here, and you're very, you have high culture involvement of culture of origin, and that this process goes zip like this, very quick assimilation. Okay. So to just go through the theories very quickly, the assimilation theory says that there is a strong relationship between the host culture and that the individual or the family doesn't maintain a connection with or a positive relationship with their culture of origin. It's unidirectional, so the adaptation is one way, it's linear, it's non-reversible, and the outcome orientation is to become more Americanized, more of a member of the host culture. Alternation theory, biculturalism theory, is that the individual can maintain a relationship with both cultures without sacrificing or giving up or minimizing their culture of origin. So you can contain both at the same time. It is bidirectional. And for those of us that are bicultural, we know that context really directs that. So you walk into a space, and depending on where we are at, the people that are in that context, what language is being used, the bicultural individual adapts quickly and moves. It's bidirectional, nonlinear, and it's process-oriented. So let me tell you now about the Parent-Teen Biculturalism Project, which the families named Entre Dos Mundos. Entre Dos Mundos, because we would say, what is, we didn't use the word bicultural, but what is it like to live in 2 cultures? And they would say it's like viviendo entre dos mundos, living between 2 worlds. So we had 3 phases in this. We collected extensive qualitative and quantitative data to map out the risks and the protective factors for Latino families. So this was part of my dissertation work, and we used that data and then past research. So what was gathered from the interviews with 100 families in their homes. The interviews lasted between 5 to 6 hours. All family members were interviewed about biculturalism. And then that information was then used, that data was used in developing the Entre Dos Mundos program, which was piloted in the community. So, okay. So we also collected cultural maps that the adolescents drew. And the adolescents their ages were 12 to 18, but the average age was 15 for the adolescents. And that they had, one of the conditions was that they had come to this country 10 years or less. But we worked with very few that were there for 10 years. They were roughly, about 4 or 5 years there. Interviews were conducted in their homes and in their preferred language. There was community-based sampling, and we did these at churches, at all sorts of public events in the communities on Latinos, and receiving also referrals from social service agencies, juvenile justice, and mental health agencies. Let's see, and my breakdown was 64 Mexicans and 64% Mexicans, 12% Colombians, and the rest from South American countries. This is a little data about the participants, the demographics. 70% of these adolescents lived with two parents. Adolescents had been on the average in this country for 4 years. 54% of our participants were females, and the average age for the adolescents was 15, and the majority, 91%, were still in school. And about the parents, the demographics for the parents, 81% were mothers. The average age of the parents were 40, 74% were married. 53% had not graduated from high school, and 81% of the mothers were working. They were working in solitary jobs. They were either working in a laundry room at nursing homes or child care provider or cleaning. So their English, they had less English skills than the fathers did. The average household income for a family of 4 was $24,000, and the average time that the parents had been there was 5 years. So developing an interview guideline contained the questions on ethnic affiliation. In what ways are you Mexican? In what ways are you American? Adjustment to life. Their experiences in school for the adolescents, discrimination experiences, and their relationship to families, peers, and other Latino, non-Latino. And then we collected cultural maps from adolescents, which you'll see during this interview. The information was imported into Atlas TI, and then I used coding, in vivo open axle coding, and then clustered the themes into families, and conceptual maps were created to capture the relationship in the interview themes. So we go back to this structure, which is the Berry's dimensions of acculturation. Hold on. Okay, and in separation, these were where the themes started to lay out. Latino influences in the domain of separation. We had, these were the themes of family influences, family, familism, parent support, parent protection, ethnic identity, and Latino friends. They were all those influences in the Latino influence. Assimilation really came out of the school context and work. So in school, there were the American influences. Racism was a huge factor in that among the parents and the adolescents. Huge. American peers were part of that, those forces of assimilation. And of course, this whole idea of, you know, you're here in this country, speak English now, monolingualism. And then adolescent bicultural identity was sort of taking those two and bringing it together. So in cultural maps, cultural mapping, adaptation profiles in immigrant adolescents, Josefina, age 15, said, so that she's holding a certificate that shows that she has not been absent at all for the school year, the entire school year. She had not been absent. And during that year, she had gone to visit her father, who works in a lumber factory. He saws wood. And while she was waiting for him, she goes every day after school, waiting for him there, and he gives her the ride home. A splinter had flown and pierced her eye, so she lost vision in one eye and did not lose a day of school. It was really incredible. So when I said to take a picture of her, she wanted to hold the certificate of perfect school attendance. And the other one was an award for being an honor student of some kind. So she said, when I came here, I had to change, like everything. I had to change most of me. I had to learn the culture, like the way they act, the way they think, the way they do things, everything I had to learn. So what we did with these cultural maps is we asked kids to draw a picture of themselves as if they were in Mexico on the left, and then draw a picture of yourself in the US. That was all we asked. And so this one drew a picture on the left, is her in Mexico, and in the US is to the right, on the right-hand side. And this is what she said with this picture. I feel confused about living here away from my family, but I try not to think about it too much. I feel confused because I like it here, but I also need and miss my other country. The longer you're here, the more confused you get, because you don't know if it's better to be here how we are now, or if it would be better to be over there. You sacrifice having family close because you can't have everything in both places. It's very hard to be in one place, but want to be in another. It's difficult when you think about being in Mexico, but you are here. It's difficult on holidays like Christmas and the month of festivities and the New Year's and all that. So Juana would be, along with the interview, plotted under cultural marginality. Now here we have another picture. This is a male, and so he was born in Mexico to a Mexican father. His mother is from El Salvador, and so his heart, he's put a picture of his heart in El Salvador, and then you see how he depicted the United States, that he's come here for education. And he said, I was raised in San Salvador, my roots are there, my family, only his nuclear family, my customs, the foods I love, my language, my friends, my customs. I feel proud to be Salvadorian. My heart is there. And here we are in the United States for our education. So it's very compartmentalized. There's a purpose for being here. Now this one has drawn the US at the top picture, and then Mexico at the bottom half of the picture of the page. And she says, okay, she says, in Mexico you don't have money, but you're much better off because you're with your family. I know that my parents do this for our well-being, so we're here. In Mexico we celebrate with fireworks, lots of colors exploding. All the people in Mexico are happy because they are with their families. This, pointed to the red heart here, is the district I am from. It gives me, the feelings I have when I'm at parties and festivals in Mexico gives me a feeling I can't really explain. You see, here in the US, it is mostly sadness. I feel like crying instead of feeling good. And that's what I'm trying to draw. We used to always be with my family, and that's who I miss. So Teresa would be under separation quadrant. And then Nohemi's picture in the US to the left, and Nohemi to the right in New Mexico. I don't know if they're American customs or what, but they're new things I've started doing. Like I make macaroni and cheese just for myself, and I wear more jeans than skirts, and the way I talk, pointed to the phone, to my friends, not criticizing what they did last night. So I think that it's at these times that I stop feeling Mexican just a little. Okay. And what she meant by that about the phone is that she has learned among her non-Latino peers that Americans, like if a friend tells you that she didn't come home last night, she didn't make her curfew hour, she was out with a guy, that you're just like, oh, okay, okay. You know, whereas if she was more her Mexican self, she'd be like, you know, what would your parents say? What happened? Why are you making that kind of decision? You know, that kind of thing. And here's Jaime in Mexico. Here he is at the top. That's Jaime with his cowboy boots, cowboy hat. And there at the bottom, there with the race car. In Mexico, I lived, I worked on my father's ranch. Well, here you have to be with the fashions. I came here, went to school the next day after I got here looking like a cowboy from Mexico. I went through that day and I wouldn't even take off my sombrero. Everybody was laughing at me. Then I started wearing shorts and tennies to school. I used to never go to school dressed like this. And now I start wearing these pants, loose-legged, loose, wide-legged black jeans that sat low on his hips. And that's how it is. My friends in Mexico would laugh if they saw me now. You see, they live in a different place, a place of cowboys. Clothes have to change with where you live. And, hold on. And he would be over here with assimilation with Nohemi. And then here is a Manuel, adolescent male. It's two different ways of thinking your life. If you live one way, you'll be greatly discriminated in one. You have to know how to change modes, like immediately. There's no one way to live one life. It's really living two lives. You can't really live one life because if you do, then people look at you strangely for whichever one you're not living. You have to be able to look at a situation, see where you are at, what people you are with, what places you're at, and what are the right ways of acting, what to say, what not to say, what language to say it in, how to say it. Yeah, sometimes it even gets as detailed as what you wear. See, in one culture, what you wear is not right for the other. Sometimes you even have to change opinions. I do it to stay out of trouble. And so Manuel, and then his father, the father said, the idea of living in two cultures is a good thing for this country. We live in a country that has different customs than ours, and if one does not adjust to these customs, one is forever sad and longing to be back in one's country. To have the two cultures is to open oneself to all the opportunities in this country, like work, education, buying a house. To have only my Colombian culture is to limit myself in these opportunities. And this is much, much easier for my children to do than their parents. My daughter can go anywhere she wants, and she doesn't have to depend on anyone to interpret. She is free in this country. If you can't speak the language, you are not free. One becomes more vulnerable. Olivia, his daughter, is free of all these constraints. And he is standing there with a picture of her behind him, because she wasn't at the house at that time. And so Manuel and the father verbalize that idea of biculturalism, involvement in both cultures. And so then I took the mental health, what we hear about in the literature, and I placed it in along with these quadrants. So in separation to the far left, this is the quadrant where we saw in Entre Dos Mundos a lot of mothers stood here. They were in this quadrant. Mothers who had very little English. They had isolated jobs, and they were grieving and had a lot of depression living in this country. And so mental health, affiliated with high levels of separation is familism, so there's a strong level of familism. There's self-esteem issues, social isolation, anxiety, depression, and it's associated with lower levels of high-risk sexual behavior, alcohol use, and substance use. Now if we go to the quadrant to the opposite, assimilation, this was where I had some adolescent boys, mostly boys, that were at a higher place on in the diamond on this. And this is an area of high-risk sexual activity, alcohol use, especially binge drinking, and also among females. Substance use, youth violence is on the rise here, poor diet, obesity, hypertension, and lower levels of familism. If we go to cultural marginality, which is very little affiliation with either culture, we have then depression, social withdrawal, social isolation, familial isolation, despair, and low optimism. And then in biculturalism, which is kids, mostly adolescents, who were still connected with their culture of origin, but they were also adapting and acculturating well to host culture. They would be in the biculturalism category, and this is associated with higher levels of quality of life, affect balance, psychological adjustment, cognitive flexibility, social interest. Familism is maintained here, wider behavioral repertoires, and lower levels of school incompletion, depression, and family conflict. The benefits of biculturalism: less aggressive behavior. There's fewer problems and less hopelessness. Latinos have more social networks built in. Let me go on. And this is a quote from Manuel, 16-year-old Mexican adolescent. English is my second language. People don't expect me to join jazz band. People don't expect me to play tennis. People don't expect me to take honors classes, AP environmental science classes. Well, I guess people don't expect me to be at the top third of my class. To me, it's primarily at school where I have met and surpassed these expectations from people. I always try to prove people wrong about what they see and what they expect from who they see. I love to see people's facial expressions when they see me at a band concert. I love the faces when people see me at a beta club meeting. I just love that. It's a look of shock, a look of surprise. It's as if they're saying, I didn't know Hispanics could be this way. I thought they were all about being at home or out dancing. He laughs and he shakes his head. It makes me want to do better. Every time I see those expressions, it pushes me. And that is beautifully articulated on the resilience of these kids, and really it captures what biculturalism is to him. And also the complexity of biculturalism, the low expectations that he found at school from his teachers. Most of these adolescents would tell me about, and we would talk about those low expectations that were placed on them, and that they knew that they were lower than their peers. So, overall conclusion, I'd really like to get into, what is my time? Because I'm on Phoenix time here. Oh, here we are. I'd really like to get into the program. Thank you. Okay. So perceived discrimination is a risk factor for anxiety, depression, and aggression. And there is not enough work done among Latinos on perceived discrimination. This is what the adolescents worried about with their parents, is how their parents were going to be treated at the workplace. Parents and adolescents are not talking about the racism that they're experiencing in school and in their workplace, because they're wanting to keep, the ones that I've worked with, they want to keep the home free of that. They say, this belongs outside of this home. And so they don't talk about it or comfort each other through these experiences. Parent-adolescent conflict was a risk factor for anxiety, depression, aggression, and adolescents requested recreation outside of the home, and they were often denied to go out of the house, especially girls wanting to go walk in the malls with their friends. But parents, because they're working so many jobs and long hours and not there on weekends, basically enclose those kids. And many times I would come into the homes, I'm sure Carmen has seen this, go into the homes and there's the adolescent. The adolescent girl would be reading, and she'd spend the whole, I'd say, what are you doing this weekend? Reading. I mean, it was like just home, reading, and watching over the younger siblings. The adolescent boys had a little more liberty in getting out of the house. Well, actually not a little more, quite a lot more liberty. So that was a conflict between the parent and the adolescent, is wanting to do more activities outside the home, and the parents not wanting that because they perceive the environment as dangerous. Okay, and biculturalism is an important protective factor, but the process of biculturalism is complex. Okay, the program design. The design is a multiple family group format. We usually had 6 to 8 families in a group. There's less psychoeducational component in this program than past programs. It uses action methods, psychodrama methods, to explore acculturation and the development of bicultural skills. It uses all the themes that were found in the interviews with the parents and the adolescents. And it emphasizes bicultural development on both sides, parents and adolescents. We did it in, well, I'll explain when we get into. So the conceptual model, acculturation, stress, assimilation, decreased familism, perceived discrimination, affects family functioning, intergenerational conflict goes up, parent-child acculturation gap widens. Without the intervention, there's an increase in depression, anxiety, school disengagement, alcohol use, aggressive behavior, and Entre los Mundos, the intervention is to promote biculturalism and familism, and to decrease these anxiety, depression, school disengagement, substance use, and aggressive behavior. This is the gap that Suspasnik talked about between the youth. This is the male adolescent youth, and then here's the mother. And the gap is the largest between them because the adolescent male has much more opportunity to go out, permission to go out, and is speaking English. And then the mother is the most isolated of the family members in the participants that we had in our groups. But it's very interesting because we had several adolescent, not several, there were a number of adolescent males that said that this was a good thing, this sort of difference between, we don't say gap, but the difference between his mother and him, because he is now able to provide and take care of her. He says he takes her shopping, he takes her to the doctors, and he's able to take care of her in those contexts and helping her. So it's very interesting how adolescents saw this gap between them and their parents as a useful thing for what they can bring to the family, how they can help the family. Okay, we've talked about that. This was an 8-week program. We had known the families prior to them coming to the program. We'd spent 3 to 5, no, more like 5 to 6 hours with each family, and they started the program. We had a comparison group. It was randomized. One parent and one adolescent at least attended the group, but oftentimes we'd had 2 parents or a parent and 2 adolescents that would come. And each week was devoted to a theme that came out of the interviews with the 100 families. So here we are. Here's the themes. So in the first week, so these were the things that families were saying that they were concerned about, and then we developed it into a curriculum. So the first one is, how are we as a family changing as we adapt to the United States? How do we as a family demand, balance demands between two cultures? So one thing that I do, let me see if I can get to, I just want to, okay, see this circle? I had this with masking tape. I used wide masking tape. We did flags representing cultures of origins at this part here of the circle. And then over here we used US flag. And this was, so the first group when the families came, this was on the floor. This was my action structure, and it was big. It was, you know, from this wall to probably here. And it was all the way around, and I had it in circles like this with an arrow. And every time, so we would do things like, let me go back to, how are we as a family changing? You know, coming out of Mexico, we're already on this circular thing. What, you know, so we would ask questions about what was changing in the family, what were they noticing. When I work with adolescent and parents, I always had the adolescents go first, because I learned that when you have the parents go first, the adolescents just follow right behind the parents. It's a Latino way. It's part of familism, is that I'm going to support whatever my parent says, even though I disagree or don't agree with it. So I always had invited the adolescents first, and I'd say to the parents, watch, and they love, you know, they love watching and listening to what their adolescents would say with this. How are we changing? So they would talk about this in the circular thing. Then the next week would be what worries. So wait, I want to go back. Hold on a minute. Oh, I want to go back to this, because I want to say something about this. You see how big this circle is? Every time the families would come back for a session, this circle became a little smaller. Then it became a little smaller. Then it became a little smaller. I mean, so for 8 weeks, I made the tape, the space of the circle, more tighter. Because the whole idea, this is how the families have explained to me, that the easier you become with going out of your home, going out of your culture, and coming to school, you know, and integrating and adapting to it, the quicker this becomes as far as the, you know, as far as how they adapt to different contexts in their own bicultural development. Are there any questions about this? It's kind of hard for me. Okay. So in week 2, this is something that had come out of the interviews with the adolescents. The adolescents worry about their parents. They worry about the discrimination that their parents face at work, even though the parents didn't talk about it. They knew that their work situation was dangerous. They knew that their fathers were using heavy equipment with very little training, because the fathers didn't speak English. The fathers were trained like this. Watch how he operates this machinery. Watch. Okay, now, tomorrow you're on that machine. You know, and the adolescents would hear about the father like learning to operate a machine and all this, and they would worry about their parents. So I would ask them, what do you do with your worries? We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. We pray for them. We pray. And there was a lot of parents praying for adolescents and adolescents praying for their parents, and nobody in the family was talking about it. So in North Carolina, for this particular week, worries. What worries do parents have for their adolescents? How can we help each other decrease some of these worries? How do we comfort each other in worries? In North Carolina, a lot of, when we went to houses, the trailer courts, the apartment complexes on the balconies, they had clotheslines. They had clotheslines where they hang clothes to dry. And you saw clotheslines a lot over there. And so we took clotheslines and we hung it. We tied it from one spot in the room to the other end. And we had adolescents and parents separated, and the groups talked. So in this particular one, the themes were always the same. You know, they were always the same with adolescents and parents. And we had them draw. We talked a little about their worries, the warm-up, talking about worries for parents with adolescent groups. And then we had them draw on big piece of paper, the large piece of paper, with that crayon chalk. What are some of the worries you have for your for your parents? What are those worries? What would it look like? And we didn't have words to it. It was all visuals. And then my co-facilitator who was working with the parents did the exact same thing. What are the worries you have for your adolescents? And we took those drawings. We all came back together. You know, after half an hour, we came back to the group. The groups lasted an hour and a half. And we had parents hang the worries up. But you had to look around you. So one clothesline was for the parents, and the other clothesline was for the adolescents. And so we said, one person hang theirs up first to get it started. Find a place, looking at other people's worries. Find a place where you would like to hang your worry that fits. It's sociometry. If you're choosing where you want to hang your worry according to the other drawings, you know. So they hung their worries with clothespins, their drawings, and then we came back and sat down, and then we invite the adolescents to go and look at the drawings on the clotheslines of the parents. And then we ask, pick, as a group, pick a couple of these that you would like to hear more about. Then we had the parents tell the adolescents. So the drawings were not identified. There weren't names on it or one, but because the worries are a collective theme, many parents could talk about these worries without identifying that, oh, that so-and-so drew it. And then we had the same with the parents. We had the parents come and look at the adolescent worries. But remember, I always start with the adolescents first. And then the parents came and looked, and they, as a group, chose a couple of these pictures that they wanted to hear more about. And the whole purpose of this session is, how do we comfort each other with these worries? Because they felt helpless as a family. And they didn't want, the parents certainly did not want to bring these worries and discuss them with their children because they didn't know what to do about these worries. They were worried about people who work with adolescent Latinos. What might be some of the worries that these adolescent Latinos come up with? Say again? Being deported. Yes. Yes, being deported. That a parent will suddenly not be there anymore, suddenly be gone and not come back. Or that the adolescent will be deported. Yes. Separation, family separation. Yes. What else? Yes, losing a job, that's true. Parents worried about their kids becoming too comfortable in this country because these parents that I've worked with, their hope was to come to this country to educate their children. And when we say educate, it doesn't mean to complete school, to leave with a degree. That's not. It means to learn English, to master English, so that you can go back to Mexico and work in the tourist industry or work selling something to the, you know, that you now know 2 languages. You are educated, you know. So so parents were worried. This was a very deep worry that their hands, their limbs, their hands were being torn up and destroyed from the jobs that they were doing, cutting those frozen chickens, you know, sawing the woods. That their bodies were breaking down at very relatively young ages, and they wanted to return back to Mexico where they could live full lives, and they wanted their educated children to come with them because the children are the social security for these parents, you know. And here their children were like adapting and liking it and talking about wanting to stay here. And that was a worry for these parents. And they don't talk about it. So in this particular week, parents talked about their worry about that, you know, and how do we comfort each other? And how do we, you know, once they got started talking about it, families were able to at least alleviate some of the heaviness of that worry. In number 3, when cultural conflict arises, how do we remain united with each other when we have different perspectives? So we do this whole thing on the floor with tape, and I use U.S. World. It's like three circles. An adolescent came up with this, actually. It's 3 circles, and one of them is intersected, you know. And it's like when we speak about a cultural difference, you have to stand in one of the circles, you know, and then and speak from that perspective. And then basically, you're trying to direct dialogue from different perspectives, and that's sort of how that works. The discrimination at work and school was very interesting. We always set up scenarios, and one that comes quickly to mind is the parents would watch this, and these scenarios would be something that comes from the adolescents, but it's not, so it's a sociodrama, so it's not one particular adolescent, it's created by the collective. But a common one was, one that I saw over and over, was the adolescent, okay, 5 minutes, thank you. So the adolescent would have gotten a C on a test, and their peers are getting B's and A's, and the teachers would say to the B student, you know, you could do better than that, Frank. I know you can do better. And then the adolescent would get, oh, you got a C. That's really good. That's good. You did good on that test. But over and over, experiences of where adolescents knew that they were given lower expectations than other kids, and how that just was like, you know, oh man, they don't think I can do it. They don't expect this from me. And so having parents watch this and then open up dialogue about this, you know, open up dialogue with the parents on it. Number 7, participating in school. Well, I don't really have time to go through all this, but in participating in school, we use the diamond of opposites. And we have adolescents place themselves somewhere on what is your pull to participate in school, high, low, medium, and then what is your pull not to participate in school. And then we do the same with parents, and then we position people so that they talk from those positions and reverse roles and all. And then the future one was very interesting. This was a very fun one where we had adolescents. It was really show night for the parents. But adolescents created a scenario using psychodrama techniques on where they see themselves 10 years from now. And so one of them, you know, a common one would be, I am returning to Mexico, and I own a house, and I bought a house for my parents, and I own a truck. And I'm able to, you know, bring in products for the market, things like this. and I'm just going to see this, but basically the idea of bicultural identity integration is the more that you're using bicultural skills, the more integrated it becomes, and the quicker it becomes. And so conclusions. We had little attrition in the action group, whereas the support group that used the same themes, they were occurring at the same time in the same location. The support groups used the same things, but they didn't get out of their chairs. That was the record. They had to stay in their chairs, and they used discussion format. Parents reported reports of significant decrease in oppositional defiant behavior, adolescent anxious depression, parent-child conflict, and also 1 year after the intervention, this continued. And I want to find, I'll close with this comment. Well, ideally, living between cultures is a beautiful thing, because one comes from one's culture and customs, and you come here and you can grab other customs, the ones you like. It's another culture. It's something more. So I'm going to conclude my talk here and open it up for any questions or comments.
And actually, what we were thinking would work best is to maybe take a 5-minute break so that we can set up the food, and then as we're eating, we can ask questions. We know probably there will be a lot of questions, so maybe while we're eating, we can ask those questions, but take 5 minutes to set up the food, because it's very noisy, paper and stuff.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martica.